Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Oh, it's always lovely to be here. There's a certain level of deep appreciation for your practice and the continuity of this group, really over time and through so much, just to know that that is what our practice can bring us. I wanted to bring into the space my lineage as a Dharma teacher. My dear mentor, teacher, first teacher, Eric Kolvig, passed away in July. And we had a memorial just about a month ago. And Larry Yang said something that I've just really treasured since that memorial. And apparently there was some strife. Can you imagine that in Dharma communities? And Eric said to Larry, he was like, well, don't you know we are part of this lineage of feather rufflers? So I was really loving this term of feather ruffler and really kind of just thinking about myself and my practice and this queer lineage of Eric and then Arena Weissman and then Larry Yang of being my, really dear Dharma teachers. I'm just feeling such gratitude for having these queer spaces for us to practice in, so that when we see clearly, when we see the Dharma, we can bring in the beauty of the whole of who we are. So I wasn't actually going to talk about feather ruffling today, but I'm just acknowledging this lineage, which goes back 2,600 years to Asia and Southeast Asia, and countless beings, countless people, just like ourselves, have gathered together to practice, through time and space and geography, and somehow or other traveling, from where the Buddha was born in present-day Nepal, all the way through India, China, Korea, Southeast Asia, Japan, finding now here we are. It's pretty remarkable. And so thank you each for your practice. Thank you for showing up. Really appreciate it. And I woke up this morning and this quote came to mind. And so I looked it up because it really it was interesting that I rose with this in my mind. It's from the book Braiding Sweetgrass, which is by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is a scientist and also indigenous person. So she writes, even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments. Oh, first it starts off, even a wounded world is feeding us. That's what I woke up with. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. Even too, when we are wounded, we are holding each other. So even in our imperfections, we are there. And so I wanted to talk about this today, and I wanted to talk about it from this place of overwhelm, because I don't really know how to operate anymore in the world. It feels like the teachings are so wise and ever present, and yet humans in particular are finding more and more ways to cause violence and harm to each other. It just feels like the dial, just keeps getting turned up, it just keeps getting turned up. I mean, there's no end to harm, that we see, and the capacity to see it so quickly and so globally, and yet if we can remember also at the same time that even a wounded world is feeding us. I mean, there is this harm and there's this barrage of all of the violence and the atrocities. And yet, the sun rises in the morning, our world is this wonder of amazement. And it's not to deny our response in this heart of the world that we also are a part of, but also to remember this sense of balance. And so those of you who may be familiar, and all of you have been here for a while, at practice for a while, know about the brahmaviharas, these heavenly dwelling places, the heart practices. And so that's what I wanted to bring in today, and particularly through the lens of compassion, although all of them you cannot take apart from each other. Four of them are loving kindness or friendliness or kindness or care, this practice of metta, of how our hearts can really lean into this place of beauty and love. And then the other one, when our hearts feel this woundedness, when they feel this world that is broken, that is messy, that is fragmented, that is falling apart, the heart responds with this compassionate heart, this compassionate response. It's moved. We are part of this world. And then the joy that when, even in the messiness, the sun comes through and the color lights up in the flowers or the trees or someone's smile. And in that moment, there is joy. There is joy. And then in the midst of it all, we are still here. There is a resilience, there's a balance, there's this practice where the earth is holding us. We are grounded on the earth. And so these four practices are so vital for our times. And in these four practices, the Buddha pointed out, and that's really interesting to me, they pointed out a couple. And so one of the teachings in the Buddha's instructions, and it was actually given to the monastics when they were setting out to teach. And the Buddha says in the Mahāvagga Nyaya, the Pitaka, says, go forth for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, for the good, for the happiness of all. Teach the Dhamma that is beautiful in its beginning, beautiful in its middle, and beautiful in its ending. So this seems rather simple, but for most of us in our training in our consumeristic, capitalistic culture, go forth. The next line is not for the good of the many, right? Go forth to accumulate as much as you can, as fast as you can, with efficiency and all of those good things that we learned. But go forth for the good of the many. So really holding this in our hearts, like when we act, we think about indigenous wisdoms and there's the thought, for 7 generations, like go forth for the good of the many. So as we act, can we act with this knowledge in our heads that what we are doing now is reverberating not only in this moment, but forward and backward in time. Go forth for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many. So, here happiness is not just the next iPhone or the next, electric vehicle, but the happiness is this true happiness that we are developing that is untethered, ungrasping, it's not grasping on outcomes. It's this happiness that we can have in this way that having is even the possible world, that it emerges from our relational field of being with ourselves and each other, for the happiness of many, out of compassion for the world. And so I think this line, out of compassion for the world, because even at the time of the Buddha, the forces of greed, the forces of hatred, the forces of ignorance were we're alive and well. I mean, this is what the Buddha speaks to, you know, how all of us and the machinations of the world are driven by these forces of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so we are not unlike the humans, the uninstructed worldlings, which is the term that Bhikkhu Bodhi uses, which I really love. We too are these uninstructed worldlings, you know, kind of using these instructions of the Buddha. Like, how do we deal with these machinations of the world where people are acting out of their own greed, acting out of hatred, acting out of delusion? And even in our own hearts and minds, we act that way. We are not exempt, you know. I can just see it, you know, like for the longest time, you know, having grown up in a household with 3 siblings and their plate of cookies, you know, like I have incredible training, like get the biggest cookie as fast as you can, right? I mean, and that may seem very trivial, but that's basically the training, get the biggest as fast as you can in so many other ways. And yet, you know, working as a school teacher for 23 years, we know that in school too, we're like sharing, and you know that kid who's gotten all of the latest colored crayons and pencils and markers, and they're sitting there, and then there's all the other kids looking at them, you know, like, are you going to share? Are you going to share? So these forces are at work in the world, and they're at work in ourselves. And so what the response is compassion. Not like blame, shame. Of course we'll do that, right? Of course we'll do that. We'll blame my mom, my parents, society, shame, you know, like we will do that. And then the response is just this heart of compassion that they're suffering, you know, when they're suffering, the quivering of the heart. And so this is what the Dhamma is beautiful about. This is what the Dhamma is beautiful about. This is the heart that's able to respond to the world, to respond to the suffering of the world. And it's not easy because the heart will shut down again and again and again, and then we can have compassion. So the instructions are, you know, for the good of the many, for the happiness of many, out of compassion for the world. And so when we can really remember that we are in relationship to the world, it's so helpful. And sometimes the relationship is only to the breath. You know, sometimes the relationship is just this breath. I mean, how many of you, not only just when you're in your meditation, like just this breath? Like, I remember when I learned that instruction, I was like, oh, I don't have to have 10 more minutes my meditation. I only have to have this one and then this one. And if I can just keep practicing that, but if I can just have this breath, because sometimes in circumstances where I think, oh my gosh, I am going to lose it. I cannot handle it. I am going to lose it. I can't believe they said that. I can't believe this is happening. This breath, you know, this breath. And the thing about the breath is it's the generosity of the earth. You know, each breath is a gift. I'm not aching my body, you know, my body is just breathing. The earth is generous. The earth, this breath is some sort of mysterious reciprocity between humans and trees and plants. And, you know, the inhale is this gift of vitality to this body that I actually don't have any control over, because if we did have control over, we might know when we're going to die and all those kind of things, which we don't know. We just know at some point. And then the other hand is that we are also giving a gift with each exhale. You know, it's a return. It's this mutuality. It's this web of life that we are connected in each moment. And so this capacity of the mind to know and be with is also includes this capacity of the mind to reflect and to sort of look, be able to turn the mind with the pain and the suffering to this wholehearted place where we can also have compassion. And so I wanted to share this simile that is in the early discourses about the term compassion, because Biko Analio, who's a translator in the Theravadan tradition, a German monk, and he says there's not a succinct definition for the term compassion in the early discourses. And so the simile that is given is this one. It is just like a person who, the translation of this is a simile for compassion. It's just like a person who is on an extended journey along a long road, becoming sick halfway. They are exhausted and suffering extremely. They are alone and without a companion. The village is far away and they have not yet reached the village ahead. So that's the suffering that that's happening. And then suppose a person comes along and standing to one side sees that this traveler on an extended journey along a long road has become sick halfway, is exhausted, continued alone, the village is far away. And then the second person thinks, if I were to get an attendant, emerge from being in the wilderness far away and reach a village or town, and were to be given excellent medicine and be fed with nourishing and delicious food, be well cared for, then in this way, this person's sickness would certainly subside. So that second person has extremely compassionate, sympathetic, and kind thoughts in the mind towards the sick person. So this is the essential component of compassion, is these two pieces of both seeing the suffering and then wishing to relieve it. So compassion involves seeing the suffering and not just being like, oh, suffering, that way that we can wallow in the suffering, but also that wish to relieve it. And it's important that there's this wish to relieve it and not like the immediate fixing. So there's a difference there, and I think it was worthy of kind of figuring out. It's like it's not an issue, not like I gotta fix it, but just like this wanting, this desire, this really compassionate and kind desire. So actually just seeing the suffering and knowing that they're suffering, that's not compassion. That's not compassion. The compassion is, it's often said the compassion is a quivering heart, and then the response. And I don't know if we have one of the Kuan Yin in here. Well, there's a Kuan Yin over there, but often there's a Kuan Yin pose where she sits with her knee up. And that's because of this idea of responding. And even I think that one over there probably has one. They have that like little vase with the water to pour to ease the suffering of the world. So the suffering is this freeing from the affliction, that unhooking from those places that are causing the suffering. So caring for this person extends beyond just this like, oh, that's tough. That's really tough, which could be a response, right? It could be the response is just to be seen. But there is that way that is more than just being with. And Sharon Salzberg calls this the art of fierce compassion. And she says, we can learn the art of fierce compassion, redefining strength, deconstructing isolation, and renewing a sense of community, practicing letting go of rigid us versus them thinking while cultivating power and clarity in response to difficult situations. And so this is where this place of compassion is in the relational field, and that this strength of witnessing and then having the inclination to respond is this redefining of strength. And in this place, we can let go of the isolation, because oftentimes what will happen is the fear or the guarding or worry, which are all really reasonable emotions to arise, but that can really create this sense of isolation. And so when we could actually feel with and be with others in the suffering, this lets go of this rigid us versus them. And so we can think of this as this sense of fierce compassion, because it's not easy. It's really not easy. And like I said, I don't know. I really kind of get so worried for the world right now. I just worry for us. And I've been practicing for almost 30 years, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I know these practices are great and they're transformational, and I'm worried for the world. And so that's where I really lean into this places of the heart and know that it's not easy to have this commitment to really be with our values and be with this remembering that there isn't a place that's away. There isn't a way that I can extract myself from the world and find that place to land, like okay, I'm just going to be over here, and the world's falling apart, and then here's my little corner, and just like, and we do create those corners of sanity with our friends and our loved ones and everything, but we also know that we are intimately connected. I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh coined that beautiful phrase for this sense of interbeing, that we inter-are, that we are no other, we are inseparable. And in the Buddhist terminology, the term is anatta, not self, that there is no self. There is no permanent, enduring person that you can kind of put over there in that place. So, for example, like the breath that I mentioned, like, when is the breath mine? And we all know, that when the fires came, and they will come again, the breath, we were very clear that the breath, the air around us, was impacting us. And so this insight into interbeing is the foundation. Thich Nhat Hanh says this is why the insight of interbeing is the foundation of any kind of action that can bring peace and help remove violence and despair. And so if we remember this place of this relational field of compassion is part of this interbeing, that we have this field is because we are so connected to each other. And so one of the things that I want to bring in that happens in this field of compassion is this place of overwhelm. And a lot of times the place of overwhelm comes because of trauma that we've experienced in the world. That we have all been wounded, as we were saying earlier, the earth has been wounded, and as of ourselves. And so when we experience that disassociation or the freeze, blight, all that flooding, the emotions, the place that compassion can go is right home here. That we too, we need the attention at that point. We need to bring the compassion right here. And so many of you have read the work of Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. And he says, traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. And so I know that a lot of us, queer, have felt this, not safe. And there's a lot of rhetoric right now that continues that. And so not feeling safe. And he says, the past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. The bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs. In an attempt to control these processes, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings and in numbing awareness of what is played out inside. They learn to hide from themselves. So this is where this place of self-compassion, and I have found this to be true for myself, is that the trauma is just so much that I can no longer feel. I can no longer be at home here. And then if I can't feel here, and when something happens outside of me, I can't feel that either, because all it is like adding the straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm just collapsing into my trauma. This has been, something that I was really familiar with in my younger years, and really have found that the practice of mindfulness coupled with compassion and kindness has been so transformative to coming home here, coming home, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard, but coming home. And even the phrases that I've used over and over again for compassion about, like, I care about my pain. Just a reminder that, the world hasn't seemed to care, but I actually care, like I care. I'm going to pause and remember that this is hard, that is hard. And so this can really even break that cycle of numbing, the cycle of numbing. And so oftentimes we think that we're going to break the cycle and then it's going to be like, like just add water and stir and this cultivator is going to be fast. We're done. Okay, now I'm healed. Like, I know a lot of us know that's not true, that we've been through this a lot. And so I just want to say that these processes are, like we often say, it's the gradual path. We head in that direction to work with our hearts, to develop compassion, to water these seeds, to remember to turn towards this heart, mind, body. And it's not quick. Another wonderful trauma specialist, Resma Menachem, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands, he says, in today's America, we tend to think of healing as something binary. Either we're broken or we're healed from that brokenness. But that's not how healing operates. And it's almost never how human growth works. More often, healing and growth take place on a continuum with innumerable points between utter brokenness and total health. So it's not that we're broken or we're healed. And in fact, all of us are probably have places that we're kind of broken over here or more healed over here. There's a little bit in between here, still mushy over here, like all of that. And so that's part of being in this relational field and in these sanghas where we can support each other, because then we don't actually have to have it all. That we have someone over here who supports us, someone over here, and we're helping out in the ways that we can. And so this is the practice of the internal and the external. And when we bring our mindfulness, we are in this relational field where we're relating internally here and we're relating externally to each other. A wounded world is feeding us. We are helping each other even in all of this. So that's where this practice of joy that I started off with as well, which is part of these brahmaviharas, part of these heart practices. And Raman Wall Kimmer says, even a wounded world holds us, giving up moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. And so this practice of mudita, which is the translation for the Pali word, that's actually many translations. It's like appreciative joy, altruistic joy, sympathetic joy. But this is this relational joy that's not transactional. It's not like I'm going to give you this and then it's just like this joy that emerges from, for me, a lot of it is in regards to nature. But it's a very intentional practice. It's a very intentional practice where this wounded world is feeding us. Like we can look at these beautiful flowers that George was pointing out just to remember, like, wow, someone was caring for these flowers. They brought them here. Then we're all enjoying them. And just in that moment, to remember the possibility of joy pulls us out of this wounded world and into the possibility of something bigger than ourselves. So we can remember, this sense that it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be an us versus them. Every time I come here, I end up having something about being non-binary. So there we have it again, not broken. We're not, we are here in the messiness of it all. We're here for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, compassion for the world. And so we are learning to be with, and just a simple turning towards, coming home to ourselves, to this messy human life that we have. And there aren't really any answers, because the present moment is always unfolding. So when we're looking for something to be the solution, this is the best we got in this moment. This is it. And so we each have a choice in each moment to how to bring ourselves there, and so we can bring as much compassion and conviction to, like, okay, I'm really trying to uproot this greed. Oh, there it is, compassion, uprooting the hatred that will arise, kind of seeing clearly, trying to see through the delusion and with this heart of love. Because that's what the practice is, bringing it all together in each moment as best as we can, making mistakes and coming back together in these beautiful communities like this one here. So thank you.
Over the time, if you want to ask.
So we have time for questions, reflections. Okay, please.
I guess, thank you for a beautiful talk. Really appreciate it, and it's giving me a lot to think about. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is the space between when encountering suffering, expressing compassion or empathy, and the space of wanting to fix it, wanting to be like take care of things. And I think you pointed to the space between those two places. And I guess I have trouble with finding that space and being in that space, and not knowing what to offer in that space that's of use to anybody else.
Yeah. I think that is kind of the, the crux of our practice is this non-reactivity, and so because our reactivity is full of all of our conditions. And so, the conditions of fixing, and who, like, for example, for me as a white-bodied person being schooled in, kind of like, if I fix it from there, then, I have the right idea, if I have that, and we know where that leads, right? So I think that really is this place of non-reactivity. And that's where I kind of think that it's wanting to get it right. I mean, that's the thing that comes in, right? The wanting to get it right. And so that is actually a really beautiful place to offer compassion, because the world is broken. I mean, the world is broken. We systems have overtaxed our planet. We know that, we can see the destruction that continues on these paths. And so given that brokenness, just to be in that question of how do I respond, and then we try, a response arises, and we, that beautiful pause that we have when we see the reactivity of like wanting to fix it, sometimes wanting to make it go away is underneath that. Like, I really want to fix this, but I'm really trying to, not you necessarily, but myself. It's like, if I just, and so I think it's just the small things. It's really the small relational field that we're in. Like, we each have communities that we're a part of. And I know you are a number of communities where you're engaged in the world and supporting people. So, it's, you know what I mean? It's, we're not gonna, in our action, make greed go away. It's a force in the world. We're not gonna, but we still do it. We still choose something, and we try to create that place of beauty from that place of non-reactivity, from that place of kindness and love. Yeah. It's messy. That's all I'm going to say. Messy. Yeah. Please.
I found outside of my door this week a dead person. And so I went through all of this stuff. And I started getting angry first at the cops because I thought the person was still alive and they were moving them. And then I just realized, I just said, you're not helping, to myself, just do what you can. And, I waited with the body for the medical examiner. I rang the priest's doorbell. Of course, they didn't work home. And, I just did what you can do. So but it's, your talk was really great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are the big old age, sickness and death. That's the Buddhist says they're, and people have, they're big, the heavenly messengers. And when someone dies, it's huge. I mean, that's a
Well,
loss.
and they're discarded especially.
Yeah,
You know,
right. That lack of
and
valuation.
I live next to a Catholic church, and on the other side is a high school where the kids pay $60,000. And my landlord who, I can't put out flowers because they'll throw them away because they don't want anyone to know that they're these people,
Yeah,
it's, so I appreciated your talk because it touched on all that. But I was like, and I have some awareness now for coming here. I was like, no one's gonna react how you want them to react, just do what you can do.
right,
So,
right. I mean, there's so many layers that just the heart breaks in there that somebody, is alone and deaf on the sidewalk. Nobody, the compassion for you coming in the morning, the compassion for the community, all of those layers, and our hearts will break. It's just and it's not about not feeling, because that's not what compassion is. It's really to be with this, like how this is part of this world that we have created. Thank you for sharing that and allowing us to hold it with you, because it's a lot to hold. Thank you. Please.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderful talk and so timely. I have my favorite neighbor who lived 2 doors down, and I always call her my Chinese mother because she sort of ran the block, and she'd be out there with her hairnet and her broom and surveying new residents. Anyway, she's now in a care facility. And she just lays there. She's gonna be 105. And her daughters are in their 70s and are exhausted. And with sort of a straight face, that she's gonna kill us all. Just because she's enduring. I don't have a clue how, I take flowers every now and then, and I sit there, and she asks me the same questions if she's awake. And my impulse is to say, no, but this is how to die. This is what you do, but she said, well, the good Lord's wants me, that'll be the day, but I don't comprehend the cost of fortune. I just am at a loss, and I love her, but out of love, I want her to move on.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are pointing to all these places where, we can create this web of care in our communities in the way that we do. And my teacher, Larry Yang, was a huge teacher for me around, his mom. And he throughout the 4 years of teacher training, his mom was moved to very many different places, and her understanding of the world declined, and all of that. And so he would, she would call a lot, but he would get up in the middle of things and be like, I have to, my mom's called 10 times and now I need to answer this, and, talk to his mom. And so my mom is 93 and has a good degree of lucidity, but we have almost the same conversation. We have, I'd say, the variation of the same conversation almost every day, even though she cared, so there's new things happening, but, and so because of Larry's commitment to his mom, when my mom needed increased care, and I don't live near her, she's in Massachusetts, I made this, told my siblings that I would call my mom every day to help her with the medicine in the evenings. And it's really been quite extraordinary, because sometimes it's really, really challenging, and she can be really depressed and be like, I just want to be sitting in the broom closet. I don't have any meaning to live. I think it's pretty funny that she's a retired kindergarten teacher, that when they used to have broom closets, so she's like, when I'm like, no one has a broom closet anymore, Mom, but she sometimes is so depressed that she's just like, I don't have any reason why. We're all in God's waiting room, and which is true, but we are all in God's waiting room in that way. And yet it's actually brought me a lot of joy to call her every day. And I'm really surprised by that, because she's a very critical person generally. And yet having her, just having this touchstone every day. So it's like kind of breaking through what we think we should do or want to do, and just kind of trying, just like, I'm not going to do a big thing. I'm going to call her, 5 minutes every day. And it's not every day really, but it's about 5 or 6 days a week. And it's been amazing because I've actually enjoyed it, and that's not always been the case with my mom. And so it's just, these are the little things we do. This is the little things we do to support each other. So the flowers, and just even being there for your friends' daughters, like those, that's it too.
Yeah.
That's
part of it. Yeah.
That's part of it. Yeah. So thank you.
I'd also like to mention that, you mentioned Derek Colvig. George discovered the very first talk that we have, recorded, for this song, is a talk that, Eric gave in 1995, and it's, now online, in our podcast. So it's a fantastic talk, and I really recommend anybody to listen.
Thank you.
The topic is asexuality in the Dharma.
Thank you.